Hi, YouTube yogis. I'm Megan, and thank you for being here with me. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, like my videos, leave me comments. Those things are so important for us YouTube survivalists to keep making you content. I can't stress that enough. But please do, and also thank you, Patreons. So let's move on. Today's practice is for the all-important hip flexors. I have a number of practices on the psoas specifically, or what we sometimes term the iliopsoas. So that's the muscle inside the hip socket and then comes down your back. I will put a reference to some of those videos up here for you. So the other hip flexors that often don't get blamed for tight hip flexors are the sartorius muscle and the rectus femoris. And this practice will address the psoas, but also those two muscles specifically so you can understand what that means. Let's take a step back. What are the hip flexors? Well, when you sit in a chair all day, that's one of the main reasons we tend to be tight in the hip flexors or in a car. So the hip flexion is when the thigh draws towards the front of your body. So in this practice, we're going to do a little bit of combination between some slow flow yoga, a little bit of somatic movement. We're going to do a yin posture to do a deep release of the hip flexors. And then we're also going to end with some myofascial release. I share all that so that you know that I would love for you to have two balls. I have a tennis ball and a softer ball about this size, but 2 tennis balls would be fine. 2 blocks will probably come in handy. If you have a bolster, please grab it. If you don't, the blocks are going to work for that position as well. And I am very fortunate in that I am a prop diva. I have some sandbags. Love sandbags for my yin practice. If you don't have sandbags, try a big heavy book. We don't have those big phone books anymore, but something heavy, and you can use a book even with a blanket underneath it. So grab that as well, and we'll get started. Let's come down onto our right side first. Just land on your right side, so notice all the parts of your body that are being supported by the ground. Really important to set your mind into this practice first. The mind and body connected. And we're going to explore the relationship of the hip as far as flexion and extension. Because a lot of times the hip flexors are tight because the hip extenders are weak. They might both be weak as well, but let's just explore. So if you lift up your left leg and draw it towards your body, there's your flexion. What I like to do is take a finger and put it right in that hip crease. Notice how you're smushing your finger as the hip comes towards you. And then you'll come through that position where, like if we were sitting, there's a partial flexion. And extend through the knee, reach through the toes, and begin to take the leg all the way back behind you. There's your hip extension. And we're just going to do that a few times. If you want to add your breath in, exhale, come into the flexion, draw the leg towards you. As you inhale, come into the extension, draw the leg away. If you find you need more support under your head than just your arm, you've got that covered, because we want to be able to focus on this relationship here. So what you might be noticing is that when you flex the hip, the muscles in the front of the thigh are getting shorter and tighter. Those are your hip flexors. As you extend and take the leg behind you, the muscles in your buttocks and the back of the thigh should be shortening and tightening. The hip flexors are stretching. The other thing is you can play with a little bit. Maybe lift your leg a little bit higher so you don't have to stay right in line. You can go lower. But just feeling that space from flexion to extension. Is there any tightness or discomfort as you take the leg behind you? Sometimes you'll feel it when you come all the way in. There's a pinching sensation in the front of the hip. So stay with what's comfortable for you. And imagine where you're making this movement from. Is it coming from that space right in the hip crease? You might initiate the movement from your foot. See how that feels. Can you draw your foot towards your shin to flex and then reach your toes away to extend? Just take a few more of these. Nice little warm up for that left hip. And if you want to add more stretching to this, You can reach your left arm overhead as your leg goes back, so then we can let the torso respond to the hip movement. And then draw your left elbow and armpit towards your hip as you squeeze in, shorten the left side body. So sometimes I call this big and little. Make your whole left side big on the breath in. You can even breathe into your left lung. And then small, squeeze the breath out and draw it in. So when we have tight hip flexors, one of the things we do is take it through its full range of motion. So usually tight would be like in a seated position. So we're actually bringing it further in than we normally would. But we're doing that with muscular strength. If they're tight from sitting, it's not because our muscles are engaged. We're just sitting. So now we're using those muscles to shorten them, to draw the hip in, and then extending them using the muscles in the back of the leg. Let's take a few more of these. If you feel like you just want to stop and stretch for 3 breaths, feel free to do that. I'm going to do that. And then pause. The next pose we're going to do is a yoga pose, slow flow. We call it Anjayasana or Low Lunge. The first thing to address is if you have any sort of knee pain, you might want to double up your mat to put underneath your left knee, or you could take a blanket in. And then your right foot's going to come forward. And with your right foot, what we want to try to avoid is the heel lifting up. We want to really focus on getting the stretch in the back of the thigh. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is take that right foot maybe further forward than your knee even. If normally you do a lunge and your ankle's right under the knee, take it a little further, because that's going to take the stretch more into the hip flexors, the more that foot is forward. And then if you're really rounded in your spine, bring some blocks in so you can get a little more extension through your spine. Make some happy space in the back and spine and through your torso. And then come forward and notice that stretch through the hip flexor and come back. And there is your flexion and your extension as you come forward. So same relationship we were just doing on our side. If you want to do this to the breath, come forward as you breathe in and back as you breathe out. You might also be saying hello to your right leg and hip, but focus on that left and that relationship right at the hip crease. When can you feel spaciousness in the hip crease? That's your extension. And when do you feel compression in that left hip crease? And we can stay in this white bread position, or you can change it up a little bit. Maybe bring both blocks or hands to the inside of the right foot. You can make some circles with your pelvis, with your hips. Get a little creaky knee there. So it doesn't have to be in this forward and back position. Explore all different movements, right? Because in life, we're not always in this straight line, linear movement. So play a little bit. We'll take just a few more breaths. Again, this is just a warm-up, experiencing these spaces in the front of the hip. What does it feel like to compress it? And what does it feel like to stretch it? All right, and then we're going to pause. And we'll do those same 2 things on the other side. So right leg gets to play too. I'm going to fix my mat here. So we'll come on to the left side. You can use your left arm as a pillow or take a blanket or something underneath your head. And pause just for a moment, land and locate. And it's nice now to do this too, especially since we just did one leg. Can you sense a difference in your 2 legs? Let the left side of your body, left leg and hip be heavy. Let it receive the support of the ground underneath it. And just locate yourself in the front of the right hip crease. Again, you could take your fingers in there if you want. Just feel that space. So when we have tight hip flexors, sometimes it presents as pain right in that front groin area or inner groin, or it could be in the thigh itself. It can also be in the low back, lots of places. But let's look at the relationship between flexion and extension. So lift the leg up just a little bit so the knee's at about the height of the hip, and then draw the leg towards you. So go deeper into the flexion. Notice how you're compressing the front of the hip. Begin to extend, reach through the toes, reach through the knee, and then take the leg behind you. So feel that spaciousness, that stretching in the front of the right hip. We go really slow, noticing it. If you're doing it with your breath, you can exhale, draw it towards you, and inhale, reach away. So we notice the movement from the front of the hip, but can you sense the relationship between the muscles? So as the leg goes back into extension, the muscles in the back line of the leg, what we call our hamstrings and our gluteal muscles, will tighten to stretch the hip flexors. Those might be weak, so we're waking them up. And then as you come forward, the hip flexors themselves are tightening to draw the leg towards you. So different than sitting in a chair or a car and you're stretching the back line of the leg. Just experience that relationship. How the muscles take turns, one side stretching while the other is supporting. If you want to add your arm to this one, I might run into a large black dog, but I'm going to do it anyhow. You can reach your arm overhead as your leg goes back. So think whole right side long. And then as you breathe out, kind of squeeze that right side. So let the hip move the whole torso. And you can play with, are you moving from the hip? You can move from your foot and your hand. So your brain, your body map sees this differently depending on where you're initiating the movement from, your foot or your hip, your knee. Knee and elbow could move. How do you want to make yourself big? And how do you want to make yourself little? Bring the breath into it. Breathe into your right lung. As you expand out, feel your lung lift and spread. And then breathe out. Squeeze that breath out of your right lung. Take one or two more. And you may have noticed that one side may be more comfortable, have more mobility than the other side. And then we'll pause. Use your hands, come on up. We're going to do that same low lunge position on the opposite side. So you can double up your mat or put a blanket underneath. This time it'll be your right knee and your left foot will come forward. So use your left hand, bring that foot forward of the knee, because again, if it's back here, then you're going to get to a lot of stretch through your ankle before you even start to feel it in that hip flexor in the right leg. So draw that foot a little bit further forward. Feel free to bring your blocks in so you can get more of an upright spine, get comfortable in your back and spine, and then just that gentle rocking forward as you breathe in and back as you breathe out. And take your awareness or all of your spacious into this spaciousness of the hip crease, of the right hip crease. Can you feel when it's spacious when you come forward? But also notice the compression when you go back. And you'll feel it running all the way down the thigh, both the stretch as you come forward and moving back. Also saying hello to your left leg and hip, of course. And if you want to switch it up a little bit, you can take both blocks to the inside of the left foot, still doing more of that linear back and forth, or you can make some circles. Think of circling that right hip crease. Just exploring your body. I very much think of these not as poses anymore, especially in the more somatic tradition, but in relationships and explorations. Not what does it look like, what does it feel like to move through that right hip right now, particularly in the front of the hip crease and the thigh. All right. And then we're going to pause again. You can take your knee back, place your blocks down. And we're going to come down onto our backs. And we're going to do another common yoga pose called bridge pose. So we come all the way down. And your knees are bent and your feet are on the ground. And you want to have your feet about even with your knees and even with your hips. So feet as wide as your hips. And just allowing your head to come down by the snoring dog. And your arms at your sides, palms facing up. Let yourself land for a moment. And notice even in this position, we have a little bit of flexion or compression in the front of the hip crease. But I want you to feel your feet because we're going to initiate this bridge pose from our feet. See what it feels like just to push your heels into the ground. Just do that and then release a few times. And notice when you push your heels into the ground, you might even push the balls of the feet into the ground as well. When you do that, can you feel any activation in the backs of the thighs and the buttocks? Because that's what we want. We want to lift up with the power of the thighs and the buttocks, because the more we can engage the back line of the legs, the more we're giving the front line, the hip flexors, permission to stretch. So the lifting begins by pushing into the heels and the balls of the feet, and then we lift up. You can float up on your inhale if you'd like, and then slowly come down on your exhale. Whoops. So push down into your feet. See if you can feel some shortening through the backs of the thighs and lengthening in the fronts of the thighs. And then coming back down, slowly releasing back to the ground. I like to also slightly push the backs of my hands and my shoulder blades into the ground. So this becomes a little bit more of a full body movement. Encourage the torso to help out. So pushing backs, the hands, shoulders down, and feet. Lift the pelvis. And come down. So we're not going into a deep stretch yet, perhaps, of the front of the thighs, of the hip flexors. But we are recruiting the muscles and the backs of the thighs to encourage that stretch eventually. Just taking a few more of these bridge poses, lifting up and releasing down. Next one, we're going to come up and we're going to hold it for about 3 to 5 breaths. So see if you can continue to push into the feet, and even imagine drawing the heels of your feet towards your buttocks, and you might feel even more strength come into the backs of the thighs. And that might allow you to lift the front of your hip creases just a little bit higher. So we're getting an easeful stretch through the front of the hip flexors, but we're really engaging the back line, the gluteal muscles in your buttocks and your hamstrings. 2 more rounds of breath. And release down. So we're going to do that same pose 2 more times. And I'm going to give you the option to continue to do it just as we did it with both feet on the ground. Or if you're feeling up to it, we can do it with just one leg, one side at a time. So I'll walk you through that. But we'll lift up with both legs, push into your feet, push into your shoulders, inhale, lift up, find your position to hold. And if it feels okay, transfer the weight into your right foot. You might just come onto the left toes first. That's our starting point. And if we're doing that, watch that your left hip does not drop. So if you put your hands right on the fronts of the hip bones or in those hip creases, they're staying even. If you want more challenge, that left foot can lift up wherever you want. Take your 3 to 5 breaths. So now we're really digging in deep in those muscles in the back line of the leg, calling on them to hold us up in a way that'll help the front line release and relax. Take your last breath. If that left leg's up, take it down and slowly release down. This is also a nice way when we do one leg at a time like this to notice if one side might be tighter or weaker. Sometimes it's tighter and weaker. So let's switch sides. Pause for a moment. Let it all go. Next breath in, push into the heels and the balls of the feet. Lift your pelvis off the ground. Find a place where you feel sturdy and safe. See if you can just transfer your weight into your left foot. And sometimes we transfer the weight into the left foot. And even just that, you can release the muscles in the right buttocks and thigh without even lifting the leg up. You might come onto just the right toes. Keep the hips even. If you want to keep searching, go a little bit further. Lift your foot up wherever you want. Fire up the back line of the left leg. Keep lifting both hips up towards the sky, those hip creases. And the other thing I'm looking for, and for me, is to make sure my low back muscles are staying more relaxed, calling on those butt muscles and the back of the thigh. The ones that we sit on all day, part of the reason those hip flexors are tight. And then slow down, come down, let it go. Relax for a moment. Sometimes a nice little windshield wiper will feel good after that, letting your legs go side to side. Okay, and pause. The next movement we do, we're going to roll onto our front body. So from the front body, we're going to work again on, this is more of the idea of engaging the back side in order to get the front side to release. Coming onto your front body, take your arms into like a cactus position or a goalpost position, and you can rest on your chin, your forehead. Just shift your hips side to side. Want to let the body land on the front side. So let the ground support everything that's touching the ground. All that feeling of support from the ground. Just feeling it. And accepting it. And then sense just your left leg from the toes all the way to the hip. And as you breathe in, you're going to reach your big toe towards the back of the mat. I'm reaching towards the dog. And then think of lifting that left leg from your inner thigh as high up as you can. No knee bend. We're keeping the knee straight. Lift it as high as you can. And notice once again how you're engaging the muscles in the back of the thigh and the gluteal muscles, the buttocks. But you're stretching just a little, but you're feeling that stretch in the front of the hip flexor. And then as you release, come down, let it go. Let's switch sides. Feel your right leg. Reach your big toe away from your hip or towards the dog in my case. Lift from your inner thigh as high as you can go. And slowly release down. So we're going to go in this pattern with the legs 2 more times and see if you're really sensing that it's one leg at a time it's engaging. So the other butt cheek, your right butt cheek is quiet right now. And then releasing. And we're going to hold it for just a few breaths each time we go up. So lift it up. Hold that right leg up. Can you release the left side? Just the right leg strong. Feel the space in the front of the hip and thigh. Release it down. Last round, just the legs. Left leg lifts. Feel the back of the leg engage. Front is stretching. Release it down. Shake it out. Right leg, reach the big toe, lift from your inner thigh. You can even think of lifting from the back of the knee. Left side's quiet. Release. So we're going to add just a little bit to that to go into what we call a crossbody movement. So now as you lift the left leg, also lift your head, but I'm not lifting my neck so much. I shouldn't say lift the head. I should say lift your heart. Lift your heart, take your gaze still down at the ground, and then you're going to turn towards your right arm as your left leg lifts, and then come down onto your left ear. Left leg, left ear land together. As you breathe in, right leg lifts. Let your head come through the center, and then turn and land on your right ear as the right leg comes down. Do just a few more of these. Left leg lifts. Lifting up through your back line, exhaling, Left ear, left leg land. Relax all the muscles. Coming up, right leg engages. Your head comes through center. Landing on right ear. Letting the right leg come down. So the last thing we can add to this, if you'd like, for a little more sensation, as you're lifting the left leg, either just reach the right arm forward or even lift the right arm. So this is that cross body. Notice how, we'll pause here for a moment so you can feel how you're active through the left back leg, buttocks, and right shoulder. As you breathe out, let the arm come down, leg come down. Rest onto your left cheek. Let's try the other side. Reach for your right leg, reach it back. Lift from the inner thigh. You can either just crawl your left hand forward or you can come onto your fingertips or lift it up. Take a few breaths there. Notice the relationship of left shoulder and right hip buttocks engaging. So left buttocks relaxed, right shoulder relaxed. Exhale. Come down. We'll do this one a few times in movement and then we'll do a final hold. So inhale, left leg, right arm come up. Exhale. Release. Inhale, right leg, left arm, cross body pattern. Exhale. Release. Inhale, left leg, right arm, last round moving. Exhale, release. Inhale, right leg, left arm. Exhale. Release. Last one, we'll just hold for 3 to 5 breaths. So as you breathe in, lift up, left leg, reach the big toe back. Think of lifting from the inner thigh. Right arm is extended, hands on the floor or lifting. Relax your left arm, relax your right butt cheek and your thigh. Feel the space in the front of the hip. So really all the muscles do better with the idea of releasing when we make it more of a full body pattern. So notice how your back muscles are engaged. So not only is the front of the left thigh flexing and lengthening, the front of the left torso is flexing and lengthening. And then release down. Onto the left cheek. This one builds a little bit of heat. Let's do our hold on the other side. Reach your right foot back. Left arm can just come forward or you can lift it up. So notice engagement through the left arm and shoulder, right hip and leg, left leg and hip quiet, right arm quiet. Sense it. Be in it. Back muscles engaged, torso long, spacious, just like that right hip crease. And slowly release down, let it go. Oftentimes after a back bend, it feels good to stretch the back. So if you're a person that likes your child's pose, you can push back into your child's pose to stretch your low back. If your knees grump at you in that position, then I highly recommend you come onto your back instead and draw your legs into your body, either one. You can be still, or if you're in your child's pose, rock your hips gently side by side. If you've chosen the child's pose to release your back, please take your time and come down onto your backside, where we'll do our next release. And this is more of a true release, a yin release. If you have that book, phone book, and bolster, keep those handy. Coming onto the backside. We'll start by just taking your legs out long, and notice as you take your legs out long, is there any pulling in the front of the hip crease or tops of the thighs? Just feeling. So if you let your legs go long and shake them out, is it comfortable for that to happen, or does your Low back pop up and shorten. These are all things we look at with tight hip flexors. And let the ground support your back body. Just focusing on the sensation of support for everything that's touching the ground. When we work with psoas, we can think of breathing into the area of the diaphragm, our 12th rib even, so you can place your hands at the bottoms of ribs. Like you're breathing to your psoas, that all-powerful hip flexor. Relaxing, releasing, replenishing the whole torso, center of the spine. And see if you can keep some of that sense of relaxation as you bend your knees. I like to lengthen my tailbone to flatten the low back. And then we're going to lift both legs up. Just draw them towards you into a position of flexion. Taking a moment there. Keep the right leg in towards your body. And then take your left foot to the floor and begin to slowly extend the left leg out. Just slide it out. You can slide it out as you breathe in. And then slide it back as you breathe out. And draw it all the way back into flexion. So you're going to inhale, slide it out into extension. And exhale. Slide it back. Don't force it. Just to where it goes comfortably. And if your hands around your right shin doesn't work, it can also go around the thigh. So you have to decide where it's comfortable for your right leg. And we'll add a little bit more onto this if you want. You can continue to hold your right leg with just your right hand as your left leg extends. See if you want to take your left arm overhead too. So then we're going more into that full body stretch. So sensing the whole left side getting long. Let the hip flexor stretch intermingle with the rest of the body and then come back into that flexion. Extend as you breathe in or think big. And flex small as you breathe out. And one or two more of those. Let yourself feel your breathing right into the diaphragm, that 12th rib. Your 12th rib is where your diaphragm and your psoas connect. And we'll stop. We're going to switch sides so you can keep the left leg in now. And start by just sliding your right foot out on the ground. So if your knee doesn't go straight, don't force it. You might get to a position where your knee is still slightly bent, feeling that stretch to the top of the right thigh. And then just slide it back and draw it back. Inhale into the extension of the right leg. So sort of ease our way in. And exhale, slide it back. Just seeing where we can go comfortably with this. If you want to add that arm to the movement, as you're breathing in, reach your right arm overhead. As your right leg extends, big through your whole right side. Breathe out, draw it back. And then you can notice things like as you extend, does your low back pop off the ground? If you can keep your low back down more grounded, you're going to stretch the hip flexors even more. So when your leg is in, you'll feel how your low back is flat. Keep that low back flat as you extend as much as you can. Last one. And coming back. So we're going to do a little bit more of that for a release, and then we're going to be going into a yin pose. So with the yin pose, I'll encourage you to take a bolster if you have it. If not, a block works. So you can put the block underneath your pelvis. I just like using a bolster. It's a little bit wider, more supportive. So I'm going to take the bolster, but you can use the block. And keep those books or weights nearby. And put it so that it's right on the on the edge of your hip so that your low back can still be long. So what we don't want is the bolster of the block too close underneath the low back, because then you're going to be arched. Your pelvis will tilt forward. We want the pelvis to tilt back just a little bit. So placing it there, and start with that right foot on the ground and see what happens when you slide that left leg out. So if right here you already have more than enough stretch through the front of the left hip crease with the right foot on the ground, that's your happy space. If you want a little bit more, slide that left foot back and maybe you draw your right leg into your body as we were doing before. So just let it fall in and then extend that left leg out. So this is your call. So what I like to do here, we're going to be here for a minute or so, opening up that hip flexor, is to put a sandbag right on the top of the left thigh. I'm actually pretty spoiled, so sometimes I'll also put one on my right shin to hold the leg there, then I don't have to hold it. But this is the position of opening up the left hip flexor. And in this position, there's no muscular action in the back of the left thigh. We're letting the whole left thigh and buttocks relax. Just a very simple stretch for the front of the left thigh. Breathe in and feel the length, the spaciousness of the front of the hip crease. And as you breathe out, let your low back land towards the ground. Think of your abdomen falling towards the ground. So we're letting the pelvis tilt down towards the ground. You can even touch your hip crease. And the more you let your pelvis fall down on the exhale and let your left leg feel long on the inhale, you'll keep stretching not only where we feel it in the front of the hip flexor, but releasing from psoas. And just breathing into any spaces where you feel tension or tightness. So if you want to picture some of the muscles here in addition to psoas, I mentioned the rectus femoris. The rectus femoris is a muscle that attaches to, you touch the front of your hip right on the left side. We call that your ASIS point. You can touch that, and that's where your rectus femoris starts. And it's rectus femoris because it's the straight muscle. It comes straight down the front of your thigh, one of your quadriceps, and it attaches to your kneecap, to your patella. And we use the imagery of anatomy, just imagining that muscle getting longer, releasing, relaxing from the front of the hip crease all the way to the kneecap. And it's partnered just to the outside of the, also attaching to the ASIS. So the rectus femoris is the only one of the quadriceps that runs through your hip and your knee. So that's why it's the main hip flexor out of the quadriceps. But also with that sartorius muscle attaching to that same front of the hip, that little bony landmark. But that one goes across the thigh to the inside of the knee. So it starts on the outside of the hip, goes across the thigh to the inside of the knee. And just picture that. You might even gently wiggle your knee, shake your foot out. Just creating space. We create space with the position. We create space with our breath. And we create space just with the images that we bring to mind of these muscles lengthening, releasing, and relaxing. Every breath out, release the low back. That brings that psoas into a nice, easeful stretch. And then release the weight of the thigh, equally stretching out the rectus femoris and the sartorius going through the front of the thigh. Take 3 to 5 more rounds of breath. If you have any weights on, you can remove those. Wish I was there to do it for you. And before we leave this entirely, this position, I always like to do something active, sort of a counter pose. So if your right foot was on the ground during this stretch, go ahead and bring it up towards your body, and then also bring the left leg up. And we're going to extend both legs up. You can keep your right leg in extension because it might feel good after having that knee flex for so long, or you can drop it down where it was, up to you. But we're going to very, very slowly start to let that left leg fall down. So if your right leg is straight, that would be position 1. If your foot was on the floor, it's still going to be a little more stretch, keeping that right leg straight as you come down. But we're active. The difference now is you're going to feel it more because you're active in your legs. The weight of the legs has to be supported by the muscles. So you can do it from there, and then we slowly lift back up. Or you might be doing it with that bent right leg. So I tend to find there's more stretching if my right leg is bent. Coming down slow. I'm taking a few breaths, like 4 breaths to come down. And then 4 breaths to come back up. And I interchange going to that right leg long. When my right leg is long, I sense more of a muscular engagement, maybe a little bit less stretching. But see what you feel. Try them all. You can also do this with just your right foot on the ground. Going down, taking 3 or 4 breaths. Feel that stretch, but muscles are active. And all the way up. And last one. Okay, release both legs down to the ground. If you're still on your block or your bolster and you want to reposition it, feel free to before we do the second side. Maybe just moving a little bit. And now it's time for the lovely right leg. So we start by drawing the left leg into our body, if that feels okay, and slide that right leg out and see where it is. So if that's too much pulling in the front of the right hip crease, then you're going to go to left foot on the ground. Remember, this sometimes is a really nice position. So for that deeper stretch, you can draw the left leg in towards your body. But I like to draw, it's really important, draw the leg in first and then go into the extension. If you're doing it, you'll notice there's more stretch there. Otherwise, foot to the floor and then the extension. So find that. If you've got any sort of weight to put on yourself, if you've got a small dog or a cat, sometimes your animals are fantastic sandbags. I know lots of students who use their animals as sandbags. But I like to put it right on the front of the hip flexor. The weight helps it to relax, and also it's a reminder. Stay present in that area. And then the other one I put on my leg just to hold it there so my arms can relax. Get creative with your weights. And find that space. You can just stay present in your, maybe it's your whole right leg line. So release and relax, shake it out if you need to. Feel that little pocket, that fold right in the front of the right hip crease. Sense that spaciousness as you breathe in, as you breathe out. Let the low back relax. Feel like the low back, the low ribs are heavy and falling towards the floor. The front of the pelvis is going to tilt towards the floor. And as that pelvis tilts towards the floor, let the back of the right thigh ground with gravity. Just let it fall. Just breathing into that space. We're in a position of receiving, not doing, but just feeling. And you can picture the muscles, your right psoas muscle attaching to the 12th vertebrae, so about mid-back. And you can breathe to it, breathing to your diaphragm. But also in the front of the thigh, you can even touch. Use your bony landmarks. Touch the front of the hip, that bony part of your hip. And sense from that bony part, the rectus femoris that goes straight down the thigh, attaching to your kneecap. Big, strong muscle. And also just to the outside of it, starting from the outside of the hip and crossing the front of the thigh and going to the inner knee, actually attaching to your tibia bone in your lower leg, is your sartorius muscle. Don't need to know the names, just picture those muscles. These are the workhorse muscles that bring that thigh towards you in flexion, and allowing them to release, relax, and lengthen. Even just feeling the weight of your thigh bone, your femur bone falling. Not pushing it, letting gravity have its way with your femur bone. Checking that your low back is also releasing and relaxing. If you feel tension in the back, try taking your breath into your belly. Slow, full belly breath in and complete release out. Last few breaths. If you have any sort of weights on you, you can remove those. Set them aside. And we'll do our little counter pose, slide that right leg in for a moment. And notice, you get a nice stretch there, and you're probably ready to reach out through the left leg, so feel free to do that. And we'll do just that movement of the right leg. So you can do it first with your left foot on the floor, but I like to extend through the left leg. You're going to take both legs up if you're doing that. And then engage the muscles in the right leg as you take 3 or 4 breaths to drop it down. So I like to think like a quarter of a drop each breath out. And then you're coming all the way down. And then a quarter lifted each breath in. But you can time it however you want. Coming all the way back up. So notice when you're up, you're in flexion, and then slow, active release into extension. You can feel the front of the hip crease, your thigh muscles. So you can do it with that left leg extended, and or try a few raises and drops with the left leg bent, and here I tend to feel a little more stretch there, but less muscular engagement. See what you feel. Letting it slowly descend. And feel the activity of the muscles. For me, it helps to push through the heel a little bit and the ball of the foot. Keep the leg active, that right leg. Wherever you are, do one more drop. And you can release. All right, please take that bolster out from underneath you. You can set it aside. Take a big full body yawn, reach through your legs and your arms. And on a breath out, let it all go. One last thing, if you're still sticking with me, and that is the myofascial release. So that is the one we're going to need the balls for. So grab your balls. With your balls, we're going to come onto the front side and do a little bit of myofascial release. And the way that I like to handle this is to recognize specifically what the sartorius and the rectus femoris do. So in that, I like to do a bent knee. What I find with my knee is that my knee's crabby. So I'm going to take a ball. You got to reach back there. You got to be flexible to do this, but you can do it. Put that ball right in the knee joint. And just squeeze the ball for a moment. I'm starting with my left side. So just do that. Put that ball in there and squeeze it. If you can't reach your foot, you can engage it by drawing the foot towards you. Get a little hamstring massage there anyhow. And then you're going to take the second ball and put it underneath your thigh. So I try to start as far down towards my knee as possible. Just depends how far I can get. And the first thing we do is fall into it. So you don't have to use the ball on the back of your knee. I like it. But you want to be able to just let the weight of the whole thigh bone fall into the ball. Once you can release the weight in and let the weight of the heel fall into the knee and the thigh fall into the ball, then you might gently roll side to side or back and forth. So just see what feels good for you. So if we remember that, we'll talk about first the rectus femoris muscle. So the rectus femoris is a hip flexor. So right now the hip is an extension. So we're encouraging a stretching of the rectus femoris. But also the rectus femoris will extend the knee. So if I were to take my knee out long, that would be tightening the rectus femoris. So in other words, by bending the knee, I'm stretching the rectus femoris. You're catching on here, right? At both ends. I got both. So for me, I like to reach back. If you have a strap, you can do this with a strap too. And grab the foot. Really feel the lengthening through the front of the thigh and just gently roll. And as I do this, it's an exploration. You can move the ball anywhere. So the rectus femoris muscle goes straight down the front of the thigh, anywhere on that muscle. But by keeping the hip inflection the hip in extension and the knee in flexion, we're really getting it to its endpoint to stretch that rectus femoris. And the same thing with the sartorius muscle. That's going to come right across the center of the thigh, so you can picture that one too. But it's up to you. You might find you want to stay closer to the kneecap, work that area. If you really want to get right into the hip flexor itself, that opportunity is there. You can come all the way up into the hip flexor. And sometimes when I do that, I just let my leg fall down, let it come down onto the ground. When we do myofascial release, there has to be that ability first to release and relax into it. So if you feel like you're gripping or holding yourself away from the ball, first choose to let the weight of the body land into the ball. No movement, just falling in. And once you can successfully fall in, then you might do just a little bit of moving and grooving. Just explore wherever that ball is. Explore those muscles in the front of the thigh. And the other thing we're doing is, if you've got the ball in the back of the knee, giving the patella, the knee, a nice stretch. We're decompressing the knee, which for me right now is really important. I've been experiencing a lot of knee pain. So maybe you do one more position for yourself. You can come to the inner thigh, wherever you think you need it. And always important to remember with the myofascial techniques too, you don't have to go to where it hurts the most. In fact, don't go to where it hurts the most. Go near a space where you feel sensation without pain and explore that. Last few rolls. And then if you've got the ball on the back of the knee, see if you can grab that. That's tricky. Maybe somebody can help you with that. Take the ball from under your thigh. Let that left leg go long. And just release it. It's a good spot to stop and notice your two legs. Just let both legs be heavy. Sense if one feels longer, shorter, tighter, or looser. So sometimes just that myofascial release on its own is something I'll do after I'm sitting for a long time. Keep that in mind. And we'll do the right side. So if you're choosing to do the 2-ball method, one ball can go in right in the back of the knee joint. And you can squeeze that ball and start with just that by flexing the knee, you're actually stretching the knee end of your hip flexors, particularly that rectus femoris. You're all going to know so much about your hip flexors. It's fantastic, right? So the more we know, the less we fear. Normalize all of it. And then you can take that second ball and put it underneath your thigh anywhere you want. I usually start towards the knee a little bit. And first, just let the weight, think of that big, strong femur bone. Let the femur bone fall into the ball. And you think of that rectus femoris coming right down the center of your thigh. We're stretching it from both the knee end, because the knee is in flexion, and from the hip end, because the hip is an extension. You can explore a side to side or a little up and down movement, some circles. Just watch so you're not bracing yourself, trying to tighten away from the ball. When you feel like you're ready to try a new spot, do that. And there's just a little bit of movement in the ball. Only half joking when I say there's an inch between heaven and hell, and any myofascial release. That's also true with most yoga poses. So if it's too much sensation, move it away, move it to a place where it feels a bit more on the calm side. And let the weight fall in first. So you'll notice we've learned what it feels like to tighten the muscles in the buttocks and the hamstrings. Can you keep them relaxed? They're short perhaps, but relaxed. And release the front of the thigh with that ball. One of the ways you'll know if you're doing the proper amount of sensation with myofascial is your face will stay relaxed. You won't be tightening and gripping your face. Your foot's relaxed. And you can picture that sartorius muscle too. Sartorius muscle is starting in that bony hip landmark, and you can maybe even feel that on the floor. Put your right hand down there. And that's going to cross from the outer right hip into the inner right leg, the lower leg. See if you can find those muscles, those hamstring muscles. Move the ball again if you'd like. I sense a lot more lengthening and release when I slightly draw the foot towards my shoulder. But if you can't reach back there, that's okay. You can also do this without the knee bent. Just the bent knee will maximize the stretch through the front of the thigh. And also sense the way we're decompressing the kneecap. If you've got that ball in the back of the knee. Maybe move the ball one more time. Find your space. Low back muscles relaxed. Left leg completely relaxed as we work on the right. Also watch breath pattern. I noticed in this last position, my breath halted suddenly. So that is a sign for me that the movement needs to halt. I just need to be still, or maybe even change the position of the ball. Keep the breath flowing. And when you're ready, take that out. Both balls out. I'm going to encourage you to stay on your front side for a final relaxation. If you'd rather go to your back, please do. But otherwise, make a nice little nest with your arms for your head. You can jelly roll your legs, shift your hips from side to side, and feel the support of the ground underneath the fronts of the thighs, the spaciousness in the front of the hip crease. But the back body is also long and relaxed. See if you can locate yourself through the center of your back and spine. Look at the bottom of the ribs. And begin to breathe into the bottoms of the ribs. Breathe out, fully releasing. You might feel the movement through the front body, on the floor. The contact with the floor is nice feedback. But also sense the movement in the back body. Taking 5 more rounds of breath. Just imagine your thighs. That your thighs can breathe and move just like your lungs. You're breathing in and out of your thighs. Breathing in, we feel the spaciousness. Breathing out, there's a gentle sense of relaxation as they deflate, just like your lungs. When you're ready to come out, please feel free to take your arms overhead. Stretch through your arms. You might roll your toes under. Push through your heels. Lengthen through your legs. Engage arms and legs. Create space through your torso. Take a few breaths there. Like you're climbing up a wall, pushing through your heels. And on the next breath out, release completely. However you want to come out of this position. You can roll to your side first into a fetal curl and pause. And stay there longer. Thank you, beautiful hip flexors. And I hope there's something from this practice that you can take out. And if you do sit a lot, maybe just 1 or 2 of these movements every hour or so can help you out. Peace, joy, love, and light.